Welcome to Michael Potts F1, everything Formula One, but from a photographer's point of view. Race 14, the Italian Grand Prix. In this video, I'm going to discuss 5 key points from the Italian Grand Prix from Monza, and along the way, I'm going to show you some of my favourite photographs. Point 1. Ferrari. This is Ferrari's home race. It's hugely important to the fans, to the team, to pretty much everyone. Added to that, it was the 100-year anniversary of racing at Monza. Ferrari had a special livery, which I think looked quite cool. This follows on from the special livery they had at last year's race. But not only did they have a cool new look, we see splashes of yellow on the engine cover, as well as new race suits for the drivers. Not only did the car look special, but it also had a special Monza spec aero package. Now, the key thing with Monza is that it's flat, there's very few corners and very long straights. So you want a car that goes as quickly as possible in straight lines. So teams try as much as possible to remove all of the downforce, all of the unnecessary air resistance that they can off the car. And that really paid dividends. Carlos Sainz was on top of his game, topping free practice sessions, as well as claiming the all-important pole position. In doing so, becoming only the 5th different driver this year to claim pole position. It was an immense lap, and it came at a really important time to underscore his value to the team and his class as a driver. On race day, the crowd was super pumped seeing a Scarlet Ferrari at the front row of the grid. There was a flyby just before the race started, and I got this shot of Charles Leclerc's Ferrari with the Italian tricolour streaming above it. I had thought that Formula One had stopped flybys, but we've had quite a few this year already, and it does add something quite beautiful to the spectacle. I had expected Max to take the lead quite early on, but Carlos was incredibly aggressive off the line and moved over very quickly to block the Dutchman. And it just shows how good Carlos is at defensive driving. We saw it in Austria where he held Max up for many laps. But here he really took the fight to Red Bull, and the crowd loved it. It was only a lockup when his tyres were getting older that allowed the Dutchman through. This brought the two Ferraris together, and there was some epic on-track battles between the two drivers. Fred Vasseur must have had his heart in his mouth watching his two drivers challenging each other so ferociously on track. It gave the massive crowd something to cheer. The Italian fans are absolutely brilliant, and the post-race scenes of everyone rushing onto the start-finish grid is phenomenal. We don't see this anywhere else in the world, possibly with the exception of Mexico. Carlos is currently in negotiations to extend his Ferrari contract, and this performance couldn't have come at a better time. Talking about contracts, point 2. Mercedes have signed both Lewis Hamilton and George Russell for another 2 years. This is a really interesting contract extension because this puts these two drivers a little bit out of sync as to where everyone else's contracts are ending in 2024. It secures the team up until the rule change in 2026, so it should give them a lot of stability going forward. It also takes away a lot of the questions about Lewis's future, but it is going to have an impact on the driver market next year. I had expected to see a little bit of movement because there are quite a few drivers coming out of contract at the end of 2024. With both these drivers confirmed and Max Verstappen on a long-term contract, I expect we're going to see the Ferrari drivers securing their contracts, and most likely 2024 won't see too much movement up and down the grid, with all the key drivers staying where they are. Point 3. Théo Pourchaire wins Formula 2. This is a brilliant result for the Swiss driver, someone who's got loads of talent and is a thoroughly deserved winner. Last year, he was second to Felipe Dragovic, so this is a really good step up for him. He's won the championship with 2 rounds to go, which sounds really impressive, but he's only actually won 1 race this season. That was the feature race in Bahrain, round 1. Since then, he's been pretty consistent, scoring lots of podiums, but his rivals haven't been able to mount a serious challenge against him. It was particularly well timed, securing the F2 championship in Monza. Not only was former head and founder Peter Sauber at the race, but it was also a race that the team ran a special livery celebrating Alfa Romeo's history in Formula One. The cars looked stunning, but they did have a little bit of an issue getting out of the pits at the start of free practice 1. Both cars left the garage at the same time, and then first of all Bottas stopped just outside the pit box, and a few seconds later Zhou stopped at the end of the pit lane, forcing his crew to rush down and rescue him, bringing him back to his garage. Valtteri Bottas managed to score points for Alfa Romeo, finishing in 10th place. This is going to add pressure onto Zhou Guanyu's seat at Alfa Romeo. Théo Pourchaire is an Alfa Romeo Sauber junior, and someone the team has long wanted to see in a Formula One car. He hasn't dominated the junior categories in the same way that Oscar Piastri or George Russell did, but this is still a very, very impressive result. However, Zhou is still the driver in possession of the seat, and he's got quite a few more races to prove that he deserves to be in Formula 1. The Chinese Grand Prix is back on the calendar for next year, and that is going to be huge motivation for everyone to make sure he's still racing. A fun fact of the race weekend, this was the shortest race in terms of time in the history of Formula 1. It was 1 hour, 13 minutes and 41 seconds, beating the 20-year-old record from the 2003 Italian Grand Prix. Point 4. Alex Albon. Williams' Alex Albon has been quietly putting together some incredibly impressive results. He's had 4-point finishes in the last 7 races, including 2 7th places. He currently sits 13th in the standings, hunting down Oscar Piastri in a McLaren, and Williams are 7th in the standings, with all the points being scored by Alex. Now, if you remember back to the start of the year, Williams were hopeless. They were the slowest car in the pack. So these results are incredibly impressive. Alex is definitely with the team next year, but I think a lot of the bigger teams are going to be eyeing him up for 2025. This is always going to be a track that Williams excelled in. It's a very fast car in a straight line, and it's ideally suited to the characteristics of Monza. Next weekend in Singapore is going to be a lot harder for them. Alex's brilliant results are going to be putting a lot of pressure on his teammate, Logan Sargent. The American rookie hasn't scored a point yet, and this race would have been the ideal opportunity. He was running quite high up at one stage, in point-scoring positions. Unfortunately, he dropped back down to 13th. Williams do have the luxury of being able to wait and give him every opportunity to succeed. He is a good fit with the team, and I'm sure they really want to see him do well. But it must be really hard for him seeing his teammate scoring all of these points. Point 5. The perfect 10 for Max Verstappen. Max has now completely rewritten the history books, being the first driver to win 10 races in a row. This is a huge accomplishment, and he has so much potential to extend this run to something absolutely massive. He is driving so well. The team are absolutely brilliant. Everyone is maximizing their potential week in, week out. He just doesn't seem to suffer bad luck. And if there ever is a case where things don't go to plan, he recovers so quickly that no one even notices. The same can't be said for the other side of the garage, where in free practice 3, Sergio Perez went off quite spectacularly at the Parabolica, and then struggled again in qualifying, only managing 5th place. But he did battle back heroically to finish 2nd. I was in a brilliant position, in a tower overlooking the first corner, and I was expecting the overtake to happen in the first 2 or 3 laps, maybe just after DRS was enabled. But Max didn't rush things. He bided his time until Carlos made a mistake, and then he pounced and never looked back. We are witnessing something absolutely unprecedented. Red Bull and Max are completely dominant. Somehow, the racing still remains to be exceptionally exciting. Thank you so much for watching this race review with me. I really do hope you've enjoyed it. Please do let me know what you think in the comments below. The next race, we're off to Singapore, going from the flat-out straights of Italy to the windy streets of Singapore. So until the next one, goodbye.